Welcome back. Hi, Dee and Lazarus. We're here with Jeff Rosenberger, and we're talking about Atlantic City, the future, current future, and maybe even a little politics. So we'll see what happens. Welcome back, Jeff.
Maybe even a little politics. That's like giving a third world nation a nuclear bomb.
Well, let's start with that little real estate current in the future, because the other part can take some time. We hit the bottom. We're doing some backfill. We're getting the foreclosures, distressed stuff out of the market.
I like that. We're doing some backfill. Backfill's almost done.
Yeah, we obviously there's still 30, 40 foreclosures. A lot of the stuff is just really crap. It's that stuff that they couldn't even sell in short sale, or it probably just needs to be knocked down. And I've been in a couple of them that are pretty bad. So I think that stuff is gone. These high-rise buildings, there's very few. Maybe some short sales because those people that bought in that go-go 2003, 4,
Where
5,
are you going
6.
with your question? What is it you want to know, or would like my opinion on?
Well, where do you think? I want to talk about the current and the future real estate market. So where do you see the market? I mean, we're down.
Where are we currently?
We're down in half from where the market was.
We're easily 50% of what we were.
Right.
And depending on the property and where it is, depends on what it is. I know that the market is active. Properties that have been sitting around for a while suddenly have sold signs on them. And they have sold signs on them because the people who've been waiting for the market to turn or to see what would happen with the market, there were many people that were afraid Atlantic City was going to fall off the face of the earth.
They had that word. They were using that word. That B word for a short time.
Yeah. Well, bankruptcy still might come to be, but that's now a political ploy, not a necessary ploy. And quite honestly, I'm not sure if the city wouldn't have been better declaring bankruptcy, for the simple reason that it could have forestalled some of the state, because the majority of the problems in Atlantic City have nothing to do with the city, nothing to do with the residents. It has to do with the state. And the politicians and the people. Like when you look at Atlantic City figuratively, the CRDA's been around since 1984, I think. Well, they've been the de facto planners forever. So a lot of the responsibility should be held by them, but they seem to be able to foist it off on the city. Mm-hmm. So now you have a city that 5 years ago, it could be 6 or 7 now, but I think it was 5 years ago, that the budgeting process and everything that could be spent was taken over by the state. So the state has been okaying the monies that have been going out all along, but what they haven't talked to you about is things like the luxury tax. The luxury tax brings in between $70 to $90 million a year. That is yearly.
Where's that money go?
Where's it go? To the state. The luxury tax was specifically created for Atlantic City and shore areas to help finance the extra services needed for the tourists. So it's like the CRDA, it was created by the state to take advantage of the fact that, my God, Atlantic City was making more money than they thought possible, so they create this layer of bureaucracy to come in and tell you how to spend the money.
Well, I know I sold a property recently, so I had to go to the city to get the paperwork, get it approved by the city, then I had to take it over to the CRDA for them to double stamp it and pay another fee, or higher fee than the city actually charged, because it was in the
CRDA has their hands in everything.
Yeah.
And they are not your friend. I believe they're trying to become your friend. I believe they're trying to figure out what did we do wrong, where can we do better. But the necessary component to this is the CRDA is still ruled from Trenton. And those guys have never been up there. Many years ago, Tom Carver was director of the CRDA, and I think his heart was in the right place. He was trying to make things happen.
Because he was the head of the casino association.
Was it Tom?
Before?
Yeah.
No, he did it there too.
Yeah. So he actually asked me to be on the CRDA board, and I said no. That's nothing but politicians are getting nothing done but ruining the town. I didn't make a bad decision. Now I go to the CRDA meetings, not part of the board, but since I moved back into town, I go to the CRDA meetings and I tell them what's on my mind. And I'll tell you this, I know they moan and groan when I stand up to speak, but I also know they listen, because quietly behind the scenes, different CRDA directors are coming to talk to me about things. So there are people on the board who mean good. There are people on the board that phone in that have never been to Atlantic City. They're not going to come. Like, I'm not sure it's the Attorney General, but there's someone like that, like up in Trenton, that's on our board. Why? Other than they get the $25,000 you say that word, honorarium. That's the word.
Honorary, yeah, okay. Well, I think the state also has, because they've been buying up a lot of the properties
Oh yeah.
through the CRDA, now that money does not pay property taxes
No
back
taxes.
to the city.
I can tell you, I can point at a half dozen properties with a half dozen friends that were in business, that were generating money, that were paying taxes, and instead of continuing on that line, the CRDA took the land and land banked it.
Mm-hmm.
So now we are land banked on, and I don't know the figure, but I hear the
20% of the city?
the number of lots,
Oh.
and some of these lots are full city blocks,
Mhm.
are sitting on 500 to 700 lots not paying taxes. Well, what would the tax rolls be if we had that money?
Mhm.
And
Nobody talks about that.
they talk about it, but the state doesn't care about it and doesn't talk about it.
Right.
They're not going to fix it anytime soon. It is not to their advantage. Since casinos have come in, we have taken the Atlantic City Airport that was city-owned and given it to, I think it's the Bridge Authority.
South Jersey Transportation
No, the
Authority?
SJTA is involved with the leasing and things like that, but it's someone out of New York, like the whatever airport runs Newark and whatever is political branch runs that.
Port Authority.
Thank you. They now run this airport, okay? You have the convention center, where actually what they call Boardwalk Hall. I always called it Convention Hall, then it became Boardwalk Hall, and now the politicians have just named it after a deceased politician. I didn't hear any overwhelming ground support from the locals, but it's been done. And this hall, that hall is now owned by the state of New Jersey, by one of their convention authorities. So what used to be owned by Atlantic City is now also owned by the state. Now you take that hall was conceived by Nucky Johnson and who was the Commodore at the time. Mayor Ruffey was the mayor who sat in front of the opening of the hall. I believe it was conceived, built, and constructed within a few years. I know it was in a few years. I want to say 2, but I don't think it was 2. I think it might have been 3 or 4. And was the architectural marvel. It was the world's largest freestanding convention center for generations until like the 70s.
And also the Oregon was like...
Yeah, the million, yes. It's now costing $1 million to restore the organ that they let decline through the years. But where I'm going with this is, as recently as this month, what are we in, October, I heard about they were finally having the roof on Convention Center fixed so that the entire convention, the Boardwalk Hall is now waterproof. And I'm thinking, they built that thing in less time than it took you to fix the roof. So the bureaucracy does not move like any of the bureaucracies do not move well. So when you go from, you're now a buyer in this city, and you have to get a certificate from the city. The city kind of lets that go through and does whatever its land use, and it does its inspections here. But now you have to go to the CRDA for land use. Well, the CRDA, I know of this one instance recently where there was a business selling, nothing more than a business with a lease, okay? That's a business. Nothing's changing, it should be a rubber stamp thing, we go through it. Well, the CRDA wanted to know what was in the other units and what was the other purpose and who owned it. It had nothing to do with the ownership of the property, but they were putting their hands in the middle. So I have told the CRDA many different times. As a matter of fact, John Palmentieri helped me change a law with the CRDA. When I went to him and I said, quietly, I don't know if you're part of the problem or part of the solution, but this is your problem. I suggested to those dealing with the real estate of Atlantic City that you let real estate people design the rules because you're doing them so archaically and ass backwards. I've read every land use in Atlantic County. You have too, probably. The point is, we don't have, there's like 13 new zones in Atlantic City. Like, who can keep straight what's supposed to go where? Yet even as I spoke to one of the zones, they made Kentucky Avenue kind of like a Renaissance area. And Kentucky Avenue, historically, it was KY and the Curb. And Kentucky Avenue and the Curb was the black entertainment district in the day. you were welcome there, whites, blacks. Atlantic City was one of the few melting pots of the nation where people were welcome wherever. And I'm using that term loosely. The blacks were not welcome into the boardwalk properties. They, as anything more than workers at the time, they weren't allowed guests. So if you were Lena Horne or Red Fox appearing at Club Harlem, you were staying at the, what was it, the hotel, the Lincoln Hotel back on Arctic Avenue. But that was the system of the day. It was not the system created in Atlantic City. It came with Atlantic City. But anyway, to continue. So now they create a zone for the entertainment district on Kentucky Avenue. And I stand up and I point out to them that 15 years ago, you funded for the Polaris Group $225,000 to study Kentucky Avenue, which gave you a report saying you need Kentucky Avenue, and now you're just getting around to zoning it. Does that make sense to you, Ian?
I think we still might be a long way away from some of those things. I think that...
Am I off on a tangent? Where are you trying to get me?
Well, I think that we want to try to wrap it up with...
Here's what I'm going to wrap it up with. If you're thinking of buying in Atlantic City, buy today, because tomorrow it's going to cost more.
Okay, because I mean, because the Revel, the 10 is either being bought or it has been bought.
There's several active offers on Revel.
Okay.
There's active offers on AC, on the Atlantic Club. Matter of fact, there's a due diligence period from what I understand going on right now.
The Trump, Taj Mahal, which is going to be the Hard Rock.
The Hard Rock, you can touch the improvements going on.
Is
There's
that,
fences
and
around
that's
the
supposed to open
entire
up
project.
by Memorial Day weekend? Or spring?
Somewhere this year. They're trying to open in 2018 coming. And I think it's by the summer of 2018. I don't know what that time frame is.
Okay. So I mean, there's a lot of things happening.
Oh yeah, there's an awful lot of things happening, and they're all happening for the good. And like even here, a few blocks this direction, you have the Stockton project. That's a $27 million project.
Mm-hmm.
Up here, the other end of town, you have the Beret project, which is 250 new housing units.
Right. And that's the 2 square blocks?
That's 2 city blocks from Connecticut Avenue over to Delaware Avenue, New Jersey in between. So, and that's all part of the urban renewal tract, which had been cleared 50 years ago. But
right.
The point is it's finally getting used, and there's visions going on with what belongs up there. The inlet was was kind of a separate neighborhood, independent of itself, but was one of the early neighborhoods of Atlantic City, and it's coming back in its renaissance as one of the earlier neighborhoods of Atlantic City.
Well, Main Avenue and
pretty housing. You know, there's stuff that's up there less than 20 years old instead of 120 years old, and that's a difference in Atlantic City.
Gardner's Basin is a hot place to be in the summertime.
Gardner's Basin they're going to be developing this year, and Gardner's Basin is one of my favorite spots on the island. But there's actually a contract right now to turn Gardner's Basin over to a developer and have some different kinds of venues put there.
Almost like a joint venture kind of thing where the city puts up the land and they build?
Well, the city owns the land under Gardner's Basin, but they've leased it out to someone to run because they don't want to manage these things themselves. So it has cost the city money to manage that. I don't think it should have cost the city money, but that's incidental. It has cost the city money, and I think it would be better managed right now either with someone else like Scarborough coming in or a better management system that's in place. So many of our things were built into Atlantic City's past. They've been hard to change. So that's changing, and that's changing for the good. Gardner's Basin, I used to go up there, it was only Ross Costantino sitting up there in the flying cloud. And I loved Gardner's Basin. You had the Brown Derby on the corner of New Hampshire and whatever that street is in there.
Oh, we can talk about the old places.
Yeah, Atlantic City was once 500 bars on every. It was noticed.
Even back when I first got to town in 1983, I mean, I zigzagged through town from one end to the other end and ended up at Grable's down.
Which is for sale now for $550 or $150 for the license, or is it six? It's $600 or $150 for the license. That's a good place.
Well,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
On the way here today, when I was talking to you on the phone, the guy who knocked on my window, I was across the street from Grable's. He thought I was the agent looking to show it to him. I said, no, but I have a key to that in my apartment. If this guy doesn't show up, you give me a call. Point is, I don't know this guy from Adam. But who stopped me? Someone in town on what day is today? Friday at 11 a.m. Let's take a look at property.
Mhm.
This time, 2 years ago, you couldn't find the guy in town
Yep.
at 11 a.m.
Well,
looking at property.
As we were talking, the backfill is important because when the market's dropping, we used to say trying to catch a falling knife is not a good idea. So now with the backfill, we've definitely dug our way out, and we're either going to be flat for a little while, or we're just going to continue to rise. So the downside, that risk seems to dissipate.
Atlantic County will be flat for a while, minor ups. But I do think the tourism district is going to be a whole different kind of up. It's where people avoided first. I think it's where they'll come back to first.
Well, that's because you see that was a vicious decline in value. I mean, in 2 years, you watched
In
price.
2014, August of 2014, I posted online an economic solution to the problems in Atlantic City. And it picked up, that I can count of online, 5,600 views, filled my inbox. And it also picked up many more sharings on Facebook and filled my inbox. Here's the point. The secret to Atlantic City was never lost. The economics to Atlantic City were never lost. What were lost were the politicians. And the politicians are now on board and, oh my God, we got to do something. They recognize they've mucked up. And I don't think the casino industry's ever hoped for us to fail. They wanted us to flourish, but they were protecting their own. Obviously they protected their own. And industries today aren't run by people like, he had a place in this building. What was the name of the guy who ran resorts before Morris Bailey? He was Morris's partner.
Oh, you're talking about Dennis Gomes?
Dennis Gomes, yes.
How's about
There's
that?
something about an operator on the premise. In the day when Vegas was made, when we were here, Billy Weinberger was here, there were different operators on the premise that were running their casinos. And suddenly, we were running from bean counters and accountants out and wherever. Well, most of the places have men on premise now, men and women on premise now, who are hands-on and making things happen. And there's such a different feeling even in the properties, like Caesars had to go through its own restructuring and its own bankruptcy and this and that. But they're out there now trying to figure out how to make it happen and Atlantic City happen. So in the beginning, Atlantic City happened because itself, in spite of itself. In the beginning, Atlantic City happened in spite of itself. In the middle, Atlantic City happened because it was still happening. And then in the end, it failed because of itself. Now we're at a new point. Mark Palazzo, who's one of the investors behind Tennessee Avenue, there's a new morning in Atlantic City. They're the best words I could share. There's a new morning in Atlantic City.
I like that.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
We'll be talking soon.
I'm around.
Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.